Dr. Richard Wolff is professor of economics emeritus at the University of Massachusetts Amherst and a visiting professor in the graduate program in international affairs of the New School University, New York City. He is the founder of Democracy at Work and host of their national syndicated show, Economic Update. His latest book is Understanding Capitalism, which we'll have indexed in the blog as well, and is available along with his other books, Understanding Socialism and Understand Marxism, at www.democracyatwork.info. Dr. Professor Richard Wolff, how are you doing today?
Very good, and glad to be talking with you.
Well, let me tell you, I woke up, I think it was yesterday morning, to an article titled, Why Trump Tried Tariffs, the Turn to Nationalist Capitalism. And you know, if you use that word nationalist capitalism, it's gonna raise my fancy. And I said, I am going to contact Dr. Wolff right away and beg him to give me an interview before Turkey Day. I know it's such short notice, but I'm going to try. And I want to thank you so kindly for talking with me today.
Well, I know from many years' experience how widely your program reaches the audience that I know you educate and teach, and it's an honor to be part of it.
Well, Professor, thank you so kindly. I want to start in the very middle of your article because I think this paragraph, while hidden, says a lot about why we are where we are. And your paragraph goes as follows. 75 years of Cold War ideology had taught the U.S. working class how ferociously the U.S. employer class could mobilize the mass media, academia, and most major social institutions to demonize and repress anyone that even hinted of anti-capitalism or socialism. I thought that just puts where the working class is right now.
Yes, and for me, it has always been a tragedy to observe it and to participate in it, as I've had to do, no choice. I was born in Youngstown, Ohio, which is, if you ever wanted a place where capitalism has failed to survive, let alone prosper, that's a part of the world. The whole Midwest, changing its name to the Rust Belt and all of the rest of it, attests to we needed a critique of what was going on there. It had been going on for 40 years. I try to remind people, in 1970, American presidents took visitors from other parts of the world to Detroit to show them this booming capitalist city with its working class. Even black people had a place in the unions and on the lines and could raise a family and could have a car. And, it was the success story. Now, and by the way, the population then was about 2 million people. Today, the population of Detroit is about 700,000. The majority of the people left. That's testimony, the starkest testimony you can have to a failure. The jobs aren't there. The factories are empty. The houses are burnt down. I mean, it's a disaster. And it unfolded over 40 years. In part, not the whole story, but in part because you couldn't criticize the decisions being made by the board of directors, a tiny group of people at Ford, GM, and Chrysler, moving production out of the country, automating it, and everybody suffering, the vast majority of people hurt by all of this, but you couldn't say anything. You couldn't. And if you dared say something, well, you'd blame the Chinese or you'd blame the Mexicans or something else. Just never challenge or question the people whose actual decisions made all the difference. It was the board of directors that decided to move GM, Today, GM sells more cars in China than it does in the United States. But that wasn't a decision of a politician, and it wasn't a decision of the Chinese. They welcomed it, no question. But the decision to close the factory, the decision to deprive hundreds of thousands of families in Detroit of a job, that was made by the board of directors, and they did it to make a profit. And we should face that reality rather than pretending it isn't there.
And that's why that sentence was so powerful, because unless you can face what ails you, you can't really solve the problem. And in this case, when you make a statement like, if you dare criticize what capitalism has done, you became a pariah. Well, I tell you one thing, Dr. Wolff. One of the things that I said is, look, I don't think those of us who understand the faults in this economic system have anything to lose any longer. Because as it turns out, the working class, when 10% of this population is responsible for 50% of the spending in this country, it tells you that we have a lot of work to do, and it is systemic. It is not something that is otherwise. Now, why did you choose the phrase nationalist capitalism to describe the shift under Trump rather than simply protectionism?
Yeah, because people should see it for what it is. For most of the period from roughly 1970s to maybe 2010, 2015, a period that most of us have lived through, part or all of it, we lived in a time that's called sometimes neoliberalism, sometimes globalization, sometimes the era of free trade. All of those terms describe an attitude in which the people who ran American capitalism had the view, and they said it over and over again, that the world was their perspective. We were all told countless times that we should be happy that factories were moving to China or India or Brazil, because that would all bring lower prices to us. It would be a global efficiency that's greater than anything a particular country could. Just all the good news was coming if we just let our factories go wherever they wanted, when they wanted, for whatever reason. Okay, that's what we were told. I got that taught to me as I became an economist. To get my PhD, I had to sit and listen to my professors say that over and over again. And it had its grain of truth. The United States was so dominant in those years. It was still that weird period after World War II when everybody else was destroyed by the war, and we came out, top dog. And so there had a certain sense we could do better in the world than anybody else, so let's compete in the whole world. But here's the problem. We weren't the only ones. By the 1970s, the Germans, the Japanese, the Europeans had recovered from that war, as people eventually do. And even more impressive, shocking everybody, was the emergence of China, who without the help of the United States, because they had a communist revolution in 1949, they had to do it on their own. But as sometimes happens in history, it turned out that not getting help from the United States was the best thing that could happen. They really went to work relying on themselves. Even their alliance with Russia, with the Soviet Union, went sour in the 1960s. They ended up having war between each other and so on. So the Chinese had to do it on their own, but they outdid everybody else. So by the beginning of this century, the Chinese are our greatest competitor. And let me underscore, as an economist, we haven't had a major competitor for 100 years, for a century. This is, I understand. I even feel for my fellow Americans. This is new territory. We had no experience in what it means if there's another country that can produce automobiles better and cheaper than you can, that can produce solar panels better and cheaper, that can do an AI program better and cheaper. You put all that together, and now the United States is making a decision which I wanted my title to alert people to. We are not internationalist. We are not in favor of free trade. We are not in favor of globalization. We're turning in. We're creating a wall. That's what tariffs do, a wall. Foreigners don't want to sell goods in America anymore because they got to pay that tariff. We Americans pay it, but we got to pay all this extra money. We're not going to buy goods abroad. We're going to turn into our own goods. We are going to have to learn that makes us less efficient, raises the price. This is a very dangerous lesson. Nationalist economics in a period when the world is more united than it has ever been in the history of this planet. That's a very bad choice. And the reason for it is that we need the rest of the world. When you read about the supply chains that are, in plain English, it means we now produce, drawing this input from Africa and that input from Asia and these specialists from Mexico and those, but we can't go back. It's like saying, let's have the horse and buggy again. It's too late. There are problems with the automobile, but we've got to deal with those. Going backwards is usually the sign of somebody who's losing. And that's what's going on. I don't want to yet shake people up by explaining how badly we are losing, although we are. But I wanted at least to say, look, when you see that president tariffing this, and that's desperation work in there, Jack. That's not a success. That's when you've lost the competition. Let me give you a simple example. 15 years ago, a competition began around the world to produce electric cars and trucks. We all know about it. We were going to go beyond gasoline-burning vehicles to electricity for all the reasons. Every car company wanted to get in on this competition because that's the wave of the future. Okay, here we are after 15 years, and we know all about it in America because one of the first companies to do it was Tesla. And Mr. Elon Musk became a household name. We all know he's the richest person in the world, blah, blah, blah. What people don't want to understand is there were 30 companies in China working on this. And one of them, a company that took the English name Build Your Dream, BYD.
BYD.
The name of this corporation in China. It produced much better than Tesla, a better, cheaper electric car and a better, cheaper electric truck. It won the competition. Besides telling us just what that means about the economy of China and what it's capable of, here's the reaction of the United States. And if you understand this, you'll get the whole article in a nutshell. First, Mr. Trump, in his first presidency, hits BYD, electric cars and trucks from China, 27.5% tariff. Then Mr. Biden, people have to know this, raised it to 100%. Okay, 100% means if you wanted to buy a first-class BYD electric car for, say, $30,000, and you can do that, you'd bring that with $30,000 goes to China, they ship the car. But for you to pick up the car at the port or at your dealer, you've got to also pay the 100% tariff. Right. And that's another 30 grand that go to Washington. So for you, the buyer, or for me, it's a $60,000 car. We're not going to do that. Why? Because Tesla or GM or Toyota will give us an electric car for $45,000, $50,000. Okay, so we buy that one because Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump together have blocked the
Hmm.
American market for the Japanese. But now here comes the economics that you have to understand. Electric cars and trucks are inputs to virtually every kind of business you can imagine. Whether you're making hamburgers or you're making software programs or blouses or shoes, it doesn't matter. Whether you're an American or a Brazilian or anybody else, you buy electric cars and trucks as part of your inputs.
Hmm.
Well, where are you going to buy them? Well, you're going to buy the best electric car or truck at the lowest price because that's what businesses do, which means your European business is able to get a better vehicle at a lower price than the American company he competes with. Because in this country, we can't get the best car at the lowest price. We get an inferior car at a
At a
higher.
higher price.
So this is shooting yourself with both your guns right into your feet. It makes no sense at all. It's an act of desperation. And even if it is put forward by a president who's putting on a piece of theater about how he's a tough guy and he's sticking it to these foreigners, he's not. It may look like that, but you're watching Mickey Mouse here. What he's doing is a desperate act to hold on. And look, I work with the Auto Workers Union. I understand they don't want to lose their jobs, those that are left all around the country. But the solution to that is not this, is not the tariff. You got to come up with other, more creative ways of dealing with this problem. And that's why the article is there. I wanted people to understand that Mr. Trump is a desperate effort to hold back a historical process that is it's over. We are not an internationalist. We're not a free trade country. We are hunkering down, hoping somehow by creating a wall of tariffs, we will survive. The rest of the world in going in that direction. And that fact alone should make people realize wait a minute, we are not the leader of the world. We want to be, we were once, we would like to be, but we aren't. And as you put it, Egbert, you're quite right. If you don't face that, you're not going to be able to change it.
It's interesting because you spoke about, I think Americans' ignorance to what is really happening in China could actually be fatal. We have New York, Houston, San Antonio, Los Angeles, and all these other big cities that are in decay. And then we go to the big cities that are all over China. And most Americans just don't understand the modernity, the advance, the bullet trains, if one were just to look at China and America and say which economic system works better. And I'm not endorsing the Chinese economic system at all. But what I'm saying, if you were just to go by how any particular economic system is progressing, what would you see, Dr. Wolff?
Oh, I agree with you. I'm not here to endorse China. China has its problems like other countries do. But if you're asking me the specific question, how their economy is working, well, the only way I would give you an answer other than the one I'm about to give you is if I was a liar. And if I'm a liar, what am I doing on your program? You don't need me for that. So I'm going to give you the answer that an economist gives. We have a rough measure, which we use. It's not very good, but it's one of the best we have. It's called GDP, Gross Domestic Product. And it's a number that measures the output of goods and services, the total, in one calendar year. And those records are kept for every country on earth. How fast is the total output of goods and services growing in your country? So I can look it up. I can get it for Finland, and I can get it for Nigeria, and I can get it for Canada, U.S., and so on. All right, here comes the statistic to try to understand. Over the last 25 years, the GDP of China has grown each year 2 to 3 times faster than the GDP of the United States. Here's the reality. The Chinese achieved in our lifetime, that is, the last generation, 25 years, the fastest rate of growth of any economy anywhere ever. Now, no matter what you think of a country, whatever criticisms you have of its politics, of its civil liberty, whatever it might be, there is no sense in making believe that what I just said isn't the case. That's why they can produce the best electric cars. That's why they have a fast rail system that the United States, we're not 20 years from being able to do that. That's why they're in a position to challenge us around the world. That's, if you want to get specific, that's part of the reason why Russia can fight a war against the United States and all of Europe and Ukraine and basically win that war, because they've got China at their back. But these are the realities we have to deal with, making believe it didn't happen. Go to China, look at the cities, see how people eat, see how people are dressed, see their cars in their driveways where they live, and on and on and on. By the way, many of the things you'll see as an American are familiar to you, because the Chinese have often tried to mimic, to copy. We are the model of wealth. We have been for the last century. So they're catching up, and now they're going to surpass us. And that's underway.
It is interesting because I was watching a few videos and reading a few articles talking about the expansion of China across the world. I know you're well familiar with the Belts and Roads, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Belts and Roads. Whereas we are bombing around the world, this great capitalist freedom country is bombing the world. Venezuela may be next on the hit list. But what they're doing is establishing relationships. And it seems like relationships create much better economies than blowing stuff up. Would you say?
Yeah. Yes, I tell people the United States maintains 700, actually a bit more, 700 military bases around the world, including all around China. How many military bases abroad does the Chinese military maintain? One. I mean, if you ever wanted, who's aggressive? Who's got troops everywhere? We do. Who's not? Russia and China. They may be aggressive, but it's a completely different story. They're aggressive at their border. They're aggressive around their immediate interest, but they don't pretend to do what the United States does and what we can no longer afford. But look, part of the reason China can catch up is it devoted itself to doing that. That was its highest priority. As it is, by the way, for most of the poor countries on this earth. They want to have a decent standard of living for their people. If it's not the number one priority, it's right up there at the top. And that's one of the reasons they're eager to work with China on this Belt and Road Initiative, which, by the way, runs from China all the way up into Europe. And all the countries along the way, they are creating rail systems and seaports and all the rest, because
Peru, Argentina, all these countries.
Now in Latin America, that's right. And if the United States keeps threatening Mexico, threatening Canada, threatening Greenland, threatening Venezuela, threatening Nigeria. I mean, Jesus, it's the old colonial mentality, the old colonial imagery. And the Chinese keep saying that's not what we're about. We don't want the military stuff. We want to build economic well-being. And the truth of it is, which the great thinkers about military affairs have always known, in the end, what gives you a powerful military is if you have a strong, functioning economy behind it, so that the young people that you are in the military are well fed, are well educated, are motivated. What does that mean? That means you have to have jobs for them and their families, and you have to have schools, and you have to have medical care. Look what we're doing right now in the Congress. We're nickel and diming our medical care so that millions of people may not have medical insurance. Are you crazy? What do you think is going to happen in those families? They're not going to have healthy kids. They're going to postpone a visit to the dentist or the doctor because they don't have the cash. We all know what this means, but so does the rest of the world. They watch the United States, first moving its industry out of the country and now decimating the social supports for its people. That's not the story of a rising economic system. That's a story of one going down. And we are not escaping that. And it's going to cost us terribly if we don't face it and change it.
It's interesting because I was speaking to a Chinese national, and he said there's a big difference between how we think. Our spoils, meaning a lot of their profits, etc., go right back into people, into building people, building universities, building knowledge, acquiring knowledge. Our spoils go directly to the 1%. In other words, as we produce and produce more and get more efficient, it's not the people who produce, it's the parasites who run the people who produce that actually get the spoils. And what has happened is that it has shown in the economic development, in the educational development of the populations. If you take a look at the two populations, you can see the difference in both their economic and their development. Our economic development is in decline. Their economic development is on the ascent. So go ahead.
Let me just add, I'm a professor. So I'm receiving from the universities that I'm associated with, where I've taught and so on, I receive emails from the various administrations. They're cutting back here, they're cutting back there, they're apologizing to their students that they have to raise the rent. It's all contraction. It's all and the Chinese are opening new universities left and right. I mean, you couldn't see a starker difference in where they're doing now what the United States did after World War II, and it, invested in all these state universities and gave the working class a chance to go to college, which used to be only for wealthier people, and now you're cutting it back left and right. This is cutting back healthcare, cutting back education, getting rid of your education department. What are you doing? Pandering to some ideological notion of what goes on in school. You're sacrificing the basic supports and funding of your education system. It is an extraordinary exercise in self-destruction. And I say this with all sadness, historians will look back on this period, shake their heads, and wonder what got into the American people that they went down that road.
Dr. Wolff, one of the guys I always call the god of capitalism, from the Chicago School of Milton Friedman. He once said that the executives in corporations should worry nothing about humanity. I'm paraphrasing, of course. Nothing about humanity. It's they work solely for the shareholders. And in doing so, what we have seen is that the system, I mean, if you believe him, you have to say that our system is running as designed. Capitalism in America is running as designed. If you follow that tenet, and when he says that, and at the same time, we had back in the 70s, I think it was 70s, the release of the Powell memo that I think your phraseology pretty much comes from. I find that it is people like yourself, because I remember coming to the United States and taking my first economics class. And I tell you, the way I started, I believed in humanity. I believed that if you make a certain amount of money, eventually you've got enough and the rest need to be shared, all that sort of stuff. And the professor laughed at me, right? I was a laughing stock to the professor, etc. But eventually I even adapted some of the capitalist tenets. And I remember going to one of your conferences. It was that conference that you gave where you showed that all during the Clinton years and other years after Reagan, we did not have increase in wages or anything like that, but we had increase in prosperity built on credit.
Right.
And that chart that you drew, that chart that you put on the stream made an indelible impression that changed my entire outlook on what our economic system was and what capitalism represents. And it's something that I've tried to put forth to every single part of my audience, but it is so hard because I want to read your statement again because of this. 75 years of Cold War ideology had taught the U.S. working class how ferociously the U.S. employer class could mobilize the mass media, academia, and most major social institutions to demonize and repress anything that even hinted of anti-capitalism and socialism. Yourself, what you've done, we have to make that statement false.
Yep.
In order to save the country.
But let me mention to you something that gives me a feeling of hope. And it's something that happened recently. Perhaps you've covered it. On the 21st of November, so just a few days ago, the House of Representatives voted on something called Concurrent Resolution number 58. And I've been getting literally a deluge of emails to me from people saying, you should look at this, you should look, you will enjoy this, that kind of thing. So I went and, I did my homework. I went and I got a copy of it and I read it. And then I looked up what the vote was in the House of Representatives about this resolution. Okay? Here's what the resolution says. Socialism, it takes a long time, but here's the basic message. Socialism really stinks. Wherever it goes, it's a disaster. Millions of people have gotten killed or died. It's awful, 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 awful. And we, the House of Representatives, want to affirm just how awful we think it is. That's what it says. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. That's what it says. Okay, Republicans voted 199-0 in favor of that resolution. Democrats, 86 of them voted for that resolution. 98 Democrats voted against it, and there were another 50 who didn't vote or were absent. Whatever that quite might mean, I don't know. But often people who don't vote, they don't want to be on either side, so they manage not to be there. But that means clearly that a majority of the Democratic Party is no longer afraid of what might happen to them politically if they were exposed as having voted against that resolution. And I think you said it earlier today, a few years ago, it would have been unthinkable that you wouldn't have had a kind of everybody versus zero in favor of that kind of a resolution. I think that Bernie started it in a way. Mm-hmm. Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez takes it another way with their group of young women coming in, and now Zoran Mamdani here in New York City, where I'm sitting. I'm amazed, Egbert. I live in an apartment building in New York City. I live on the 9th floor, so I'm in and out of elevator, to get in and out of the building all the time. So I chit-chat with the other people in the elevator. It's, just a way of being friendly. And I can't get over it. They want to talk about Zoran Mamdani. These are people for whom the image, for example, of a Muslim is some kind of caricature out of a bad movie. And their image of a socialist is the same. Another bad movie, another caricature. And here's a guy who's both of those scary things. They find him charming. They find what he said, we should have food stores in areas where people can't get decent food. And we should have rent controls. Here, the rent is incredible. He got through to them. And the fact that he's a Muslim and the fact that he's a socialist didn't seem to matter. I couldn't get over it. Doesn't seem to matter to these people. If you had asked me before, I would have said, oh, yeah, they're not going to go near that. The minute they see that, not true. My mistake.
Well, I think it's a lot of, believe it or not, it's a lot of work that you're doing. I mean, you have been relentless, I must say. We carry you on KPFT 90.1 FM. We carry you all over the place. And of course, you're a mainstay on my sites. So, I mean, there are people that have the courage to go out there and not fall for the propaganda and the misinformation and the lies. They don't fall for the Venezuela, you're going to become Venezuela, albeit Venezuela is a basket case because we made it a basket case. Cuba is a basket case because we made it a basket case, but that's for another day. But again, it is your work that has actually relentlessly, with all the criticisms that come with it, that actually push that forward, Dr. Wolff. And I can tell you that as one who follows you. Now, I have one last question, and it has to do with, and I think it's a pleasant one because I really enjoyed the way you ended your article. And it talks about the new deal. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think that the important thing that I would end with is that facing our reality this time with the commitment, as you put it earlier, Egberto, that you can't solve a problem if you don't admit. I have friends who go to AA, and at the beginning of an AA meeting, you say, hello, I'm an alcoholic, because it's important in their ritual that you say what brings you there. And you're not faking it. You're facing the problem, and that gives you a chance to solve it. I think we're at that point where we have to face a reality that has been taboo. And here's what it is. One of the problems that might explain the economic dilemmas we face, I'll be polite, is the way we have organized our enterprises. And the way we've done that, again, goes back to something you said earlier. We have a tiny group of people at the top, the owner, the board of directors, if it's a corporation, a tiny group. Boards of directors of corporations typically have between 10 and 20 people on them, a very small group of people, but they're the ones who preside over, who control all of the employees, people like you and me, right? And they decide all the big questions. what the company produces, what technology it uses, where it carries out the production, and then the big one, what do they do with the product, with the revenue, that all this work. These tiny groups at the top make all those decisions. We, the employees, we live with those decisions, but we don't participate in them. The corporation is not, and there's no way to be polite about this, it is not a democratic institution. For example, the price of whatever it is you help to produce is determined by the people at the top, not by you. You don't go to a meeting where you vote, raise the price, lower the price. That's them. They decide what the wage and salary structure will be. They offer it to you. You can take it or leave it and go somewhere else, but they're in a position. These days, as I listen to people say, affordability is the issue. What a funny word. The employer tells you how much income you got, and the employer sets the prices that you spend that income on. It's not called, affordability. It's called capitalism. It's the way the system works. And if it's not working out for you, if you can't afford the education, the healthcare, all the basic things to make a decent life, then your problem isn't the politician. Your problem is a system that's set up. Well, we've got to challenge that. And so I end the article, as I do most of my work, by saying, try, my fellow Americans, try to ask yourself the question, might there be another different way to organize the factory, the office, the store than the one we have? We're supposed to be a country committed to, in love with democracy. And yet, when we cross the threshold into the factory or office or store, wherever we work, we give all that up. We allow a tiny group of people to tell us, sit there, work this way, don't take more than 4 minutes in the bathroom, whatever. It's not a democratic arrangement. And I think our economy would be more successful producing for us, the people, if we, the people, were in charge of the enterprises. Look, we insist on voting where we live because we don't want a mayor or a Congress or a city council to make decisions that we don't have input. Well, if that makes sense in the neighborhood where you live, could someone explain to me why it isn't worth thinking about that as the way to organize the workplace, and for all the same reasons? And yet we've never done that. It's a taboo topic. You start talking like that, and the labels socialist, communist, all of that will be heaved at you right away. And not because your arguments aren't good, but because they want you to stop talking like that.
Exactly right.
And a personal note, I'm a product of the most elite universities this country has. I had the good fortune. I went to Harvard, then I went to Stanford, and I finished my education at Yale. It's like a joke, like a poster boy for the elites. And they taught me how to think about economics. For 10 years, I spent in those three schools. All I'm doing is taking the economic analysis I was taught and applying it to my own society, which is always what I thought I was supposed to do. Imagine my shock when I did that and discovered that my teachers were unhappy with what I had chosen to say and do because it wasn't celebrating the system. But I didn't go to school to be a cheerleader. I went to school to understand what's going on.
I mean, you can't argue with that. And I think, staying with it for as long as you have been with it is what's going to continue to bring this change on. there's one thing that I want to say before closing. I'm an engineer by training. I always say that. People say, you always say that. I always say that for specific reasons. I love math. I believe in math. And, we make our economic system sometimes more complicated than it is. If 1% of the people are growing at a much higher percentage than the vast majority of the system in a closed economic system that's growing at a particular rate, it is impossible for for the elite eventually not to take it all, which is exactly what is happening today.
Right.
It's by design. It's not an accident. It's by design. Dr. Wolff, let me tell you, it's every time I speak to you, it's always a pleasure because I learn something, our audience learns something, and I think we are reaching that tipping point where people are going to understand that we're in a failed economic system, and only accepting that and making the necessary changes are going to make it. Please give me a closer.
Wow. That's a very nice ending for you. You've been very kind to me. I want to congratulate you. It was years ago that we first crossed paths down there in the American South, one of my visits down there. And I just appreciate very much that you've stuck it out, that you've continued to do it. Politics done right is exactly the way to characterize it. Do the politics, but do it based on a solid foundation. Don't be afraid to call it out for the system. I don't want to blame individuals. I understand individuals are born into a system. They're taught its values. They're taught its rewards. And so we shouldn't be surprised if they end up doing things. The things we don't want them to do come out of this system. If we want them to be the better people they too somewhere want to be, then give them the system that can enable them to be good people while they find a living, rather than stepping on each other and producing the kind of tensions we see all around us in America today.
Dr. Richard Wolff, it has been my pleasure. Thank you so kindly for having been one more time on Politics Done Right.
And thank you for the honor to do so.
If he provides a $2,000 payback for the tariffs, in effect, he's saying, I am lying, because he told you that you are not paying for the tariff, right? He said you are not paying for the tariff, but he's saying he's going to give you $2,000 for the money he took away from you for the tariff. Wow.
Carrot on stick.
It makes no sense, right? If the tariff is not affecting you, if you are not paying for the tariff, then that $2,000, what is it for again? Look, it's the thing about it is there are those that are cultish, and there are those that are willfully ignorant. And those have to be the followers of Donald Trump. You have to want to believe, no matter what the evidence is, no matter what the truth is, to be able to follow this guy. And then you really have to ask yourself, underneath all of that, what is the real reason? And unfortunately, the real reason why one continues to follow this guy after you know about this guy, it's a sad reason. Unfortunately, it's a sad reason that began from the inception of this country. But anyhow, here we go. Last night, I said, you know what? I'm going to write an entire blog post for to answer the question. And of course, I'm not going to just read verbatim. I have to add to it. But anyway, the title of the blog that I wrote at midnight is Trump's Tariffs Lie Exposed, How His Trade War Became a Massive Tax on Every American. Folks, I want you to listen in. So again, the title is going to be Trump's Tariffs Lie Exposed, How His Trade War Became a Massive Tax on Every American. An examination of modern tariff politics reveals a simple truth. Tariffs are taxes paid not by foreign governments, not by overseas manufacturers, but directly by American importers, and ultimately by every single consumer who buys the product that filled the nation's shelves. While Donald Trump insists that China and other countries pay tariffs, the lived reality for working families tells a different story. Higher prices, strained budgets, and an economy weighed down by policies that echo the catastrophic mistakes of the past. Let me just tell you one other thing, right? When you have a big, there's 100% there was 100% tariff on China. And people got all flustered. Oh, that means the prices in Walmart's going to double. If the tariff increased by 50%, a t-shirt that you're paying $5 for is going to cost $10. Let me tell you the dirty little secret. You know why you didn't get a lot of, or how should I put this? The tariffs has a way of exposing what many companies in a capitalist society do. Check this out. I want to do some quick numbers for you. If you have a t-shirt that costs $5 in Walmart, how much do you think Walmart paid for that t-shirt? There is a good possibility that t-shirt, and I want you to stay with me with this math. It's simple math, but I want to show you the deception. The tariffs gives the average American citizen an opportunity, if they want to think things through, to see how ripped off they are. Because that $5 t-shirt may have costed that Walmart store 50 cents, okay? That $5 t-shirt that Walmart is selling, they may have bought it from China at 50 cents. 100% tariff on China on that t-shirt that you're paying $5 on will not make that t-shirt go to $10. In other words, 100% of $5 would make that t-shirt cost $10. Instead, it will only increase the price the Walmart pays by 50 cents. Or rather, by 50 cents. Because they originally paid 50 cents for that t-shirt. Now they're going to pay $1 for that t-shirt. So technically speaking, if they just applied the tariff in the Walmart store for what that 100% tariff, that goes from $5 to $5.50. Still a high increase, right? Still a 10% increase, but not 100% increase. What that means, however, is when you start to look at the price increases that Walmart charges, etc., you're going to get to a sad reality. Walmart may have been swindling you all along, because something that they paid 50 cents for, they were selling it to you 10 times the amount they bought it for, because you're an American and because that is what corporations do. Okay? So in the backside, Trump knew that. Trump is like, look, we buy stuff from China dirt cheap. So even if I put 100% tariff on China, because the markup that American companies put on all these things from China, it's not going to look as bad as it sounds. And then I'm going to look good because guess what? The tariff isn't as high as it looked, and it's going to make it seem like I'm telling you some truth when that $5 t-shirt doesn't go to $10. But what this does is it shows you the complicity between Trump's tariffs and the capitalist oligarchy. Because what is happening again? Because you get to realize that all these companies are swindling you. Okay, let's continue. Economists have long understood tariffs as a direct levy on domestic businesses that purchase foreign goods. The government charges the importer upon products entry into the country. The importer then passes the added cost of the chain to wholesalers, retailers, and finally, the American consumer. Every economist, along with mainstream analysts across the ideological spectrum, recognizes this devastating but straightforward mechanism. When tariffs rise, prices rise. It is that straightforward. Remember that $5 stuff that I told you about? Do you think Walmart is going to raise that price by just 50 cents? No, they won't do that, because right then and there, they're going to say, oh, I'm selling out my price point. I'm letting every American know how much I'm ripping them off. So more than likely, they'll tell two stories. They'll increase by more than the 50 cents, but also they'll tell you, we're going to eat some of the tariff costs. In effect, they're doing neither. And in effect, their profit margin has just increased. I mean, the scourge of what actually occurs is phenomenal. Now, history offers an unforgiving lesson. The infamous Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930 stands as one of the most consequential economic blunders in American history. Passed in the wake of the 1929 market crash, it significantly raised import duties on thousands of products. Instead of protecting American industries, it triggered retaliatory tariffs from other nations and helped freeze international trade. The decline in global commerce deepened and prolonged the Great Depression, turning a severe downturn into a near catastrophic collapse. Tariffs did not save American jobs, they destroyed them. And guess what we're seeing right now? Right now, your Führer is not releasing job data. They claim it's because of the shutdown. No, the shutdown is a good excuse for them to have an excuse not to release the lousy employment data that is occurring right now. The modern right and Trump in particular choose to ignore this history. Trump's repeated claim that China is paying for tariffs is not just misleading, it's a lie. It is a deliberate lie meant to mask the regressive nature of his economic agenda. We are a country that believes in progressive taxes. The more you make, the more taxes you can afford to pay, and you are responsible for why, as a high income person, you do put more stress on the whole economic fabric. As a high earner, every high earner progressively add more stress to the economic strata. Foreign governments do not write checks to the U.S. Treasury. American companies do. And those companies adjust their prices to cover their increased costs. The result is an invisible national sales tax disproportionately borne by working class Americans. Okay? Think about it. It is a tax on all of us. But later I'm going to tell you why that tax is so dangerous and terrible. This means Trump's tariffs are massive. It's a massive hidden tax on every American family, imposed without a debate in Congress, imposed without your choice, without transparency, without honesty. The America First rhetoric wrapped around the policy serves only to disguise the reality that working people subsidize false nationalism, and the wealthy and corporate sectors enjoy new protections and inflated profits. An economic vision demands clarity. If you want a society that really works for everybody, you got to be clear about it. Tariffs must be understood for what they are. Regressive taxes. What are regressive taxes? Taxes that affect those that make the least the most. Progressive taxes say we tax more for those who earn more. As this nation confronts rising inequality, shrinking wages, and monopolistic consolidation, policies that increase consumer costs and burden households are the last thing working families need. Trump's tariff myth must be exposed. Americans deserve an economy built on truth and fairness, and the shared prosperity, not one grounded in deceit and economic self-harm. Let me tell you, folks, the saddest thing I saw was a joke on Comedy Central. When one of the stars went out into where everybody's at and asked the question, who pays the tariffs? And you had some MAGA sympathizers ready to fight to defend tariffs of being good and not being a tax on them. So what this guy did was to bring an economist along and walk him through the chain of what occurs. Product comes to America. A tariff is applied. The supplier pays the United States government the tariff on the product. The product then goes to the store, but the importer has to recover that money it gave to the government for the tariff. So it increased the price of the product equivalent to the tariff it paid to the person who bought it from the importer. And that person who bought it from the importer increased the price that he sells it to the reseller. And that reseller increased the price that he sells it to the consumer because, again, his costs were higher. And he wants to continue driving or paying the notes on the car or his mortgage. His mortgage prices didn't drop. So his profit margin has to stay up to speed with it. It's not rocket science. It's simple. It's not rocket science. This is simple stuff that all of us should know. One of the reasons Donald Trump all along has realized that telling a lie over and over again without pushback, without solid pushback that isn't condescending, that allows people to bring their walls down and try to understand with the mind that they were given, that solves the issue. But what we do is we give Donald Trump plausibility. From Trump's jump onto the scene, from the media right back, they used him. They used him to make money on your backs. They used him because his lies were profitable for a lot of companies. They used him because having such a dishonest thug in the White House means everything was up for purchase. That's why Zuckerberg is now his friend. That's why Bill Gates is now his friend. That's why all these billionaires are now his friends, because they can get whatever they need to make sure that their shareholders, not you, the American people, are well taken care.
All of our country's problems, from polarization to ignorance on domestic and international issues to a complete misunderstanding of our economic and healthcare systems, are a direct result of a derelict mainstream media that too often bend over backwards to support corporate or bought politicians' wants as opposed to the people's needs for real information to make their lives better. Independent media is the only solution to inform truthfully and factually. Why? Because our loyalties are to you, the ones who fund us with small dollar contributions and subscriptions. Please consider supporting our independent media platforms by subscribing to our Egberto Off the Record newsletter at politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. Again, that is politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. It's an investment that pays incalculable